Hello, and welcome to the 56th in an unknown number of podcasts. The poet John Donne famously wrote that no man is an island. And yet in these days of lockdown, shielding, isolating and social distancing, it can seem that it goes against his concept of humans as social beings. I have to say that while I've been producing these podcasts, there's been a feeling that I've been working in splendid isolation. So I'm very thankful through technology to once again welcome a guest to the podcast. This is the fourth episode of Desert Island Discs, and I'm very glad to welcome a member from the school leadership team because today's castaway is Mr Leigh. So welcome to Desert Island Discs, Mr Leigh.
Thank you, Mr Fung, for inviting me onto my own desert island. I hope everybody that's listening is keeping well, looking after themselves in mind and body, and is looking after those people around them.
I hope they are too, and I'm hoping as well that they're looking forward to listening to your answers to the now regular set of questions that I'm asking each of the castaways. So we'll make a start, Mr Leigh, and your first question is, what recordings would you choose to listen to?
Actually being restricted to having 5 albums, 5 things that I'd take with me to listen to was really, really difficult. Music's always played a huge part of my life since I started playing piano when I was 5, and therefore actually just having to pick 5 albums or 5 pieces of music is hugely difficult. So I went for things that were going to be quite long, so I'd got plenty of music to listen to, but also things which had really influenced me during my life. So the first thing I went through was a little bit of a cheat. It was a greatest hits album, but Depeche Mode's greatest hits. Always liked Depeche Mode. And actually I've liked every bit of sort of their career, their early pop music, and then into some of their darker music in certainly the tail end of the 1990s through into the 2000s and beyond. So that'd be one album I'd certainly take. The second one I'd take, and again a bit of a cheat, is a double album, so twice the length, is Pink Floyd's The Wall. Didn't really get this when I first listened to it when it first came out, and my friends were all buying it on double album. But slowly on time, as I got older, really appreciated the thinking behind the album, really appreciated the way which it was put together, and the musicianship. And whilst I'm talking about musicianship, that would certainly take me into my third choice. A band, again, that I've really enjoyed in every stage of their careers, who are Radiohead, and from all of their work I'd pick In Rainbows probably as my favourite of their albums. I was fortunate enough to see them a few years ago at Manchester Cricket Ground, and they were absolutely incredible. Really, really joyous to actually see them live in concert, doing music from right the way across the spectrum of everything they've done since they first burst onto the scene. I'd then pick probably a lesser known artist, and this is a man called Stephen Wilson. Played with a lot of bands, worked as a producer and a session musician, but is now doing a lot more solo work. And the album of his I'd pick is Hand Cannot Erase, which is again another really long album with music that's stylistically different all the way through it. So I've got a good few hours of music to listen to then, and I thought with my final one I'm going to have to pick something which is more classical, since I've not picked a single classical thing here to listen to. And I would then go back to a piece of music I've played in and I've sung in on several occasions. So I would pick Mozart's Requiem. I think it's an amazing piece of music. Fabulous story behind it. Mozart was paid, he was commissioned to write a requiem, which is music for a funeral, and he was commissioned to write it right at the end of his life, and he actually died whilst writing the piece, and became obsessed with the fact that the person that had paid him to write it had actually commissioned him to write it for his own funeral. So he never finished the piece of music, and it was finished off by a student who'd studied how to compose in the style of Mozart. I was fortunate when I was at university. I worked with my composition tutor, reworked the Requiem from Mozart's original notes, and so I was able to perform in that version, his version of Mozart's Requiem, where he'd finished it slightly differently. But those have been my 5: Depeche Mode, Pink Floyd's The Wall, In Rainbows from Rainbow Head, Stephen Wilson's Hand Cannot Erase, and Mozart's Requiem Mass.
Now, that's a wonderfully eclectic collection of music that you have there, Mr. Leigh. I don't think many people would go from Radiohead to Depeche Mode to Pink Floyd and then to Mozart. And one of the things that I found doing these Desert Island Disc podcasts, and I hope the listeners have found this too, is the opportunity to listen to types of music that we've never heard of. Stephen Wilson, for example, I've never heard of as a recording artist, and based on your recommendation alone, I'm going to search that out and give him a listen. I want to go back to the Mozart Requiem, if I may, as well. What a privilege it must have been to walk in Mozart's footsteps and be able to use his original notes in order to then rework that Requiem Mass. What that must have been like to do as a process, as a composer, or as even just as a student of music, is something quite magnificent, I believe. Now on to your next question. Which book would you read?
With having a 1-year-old, I don't really get a great deal of chance to read books anymore. So actually, having the chance to read something would become a real luxury. And therefore I thought carefully about which book I'd like to take if I was only taking one book. And what I came up with is a book that I've not read in a long time, read once probably 10 plus years ago. And that's Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything. It's a fabulous read. It's really informative, thought-provoking, and I think I'd really benefit from a second read to pick up all those things that I probably missed or didn't quite understand the first time I read through the book. So that'd be Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything.
Well, I'm a fan of Bill Bryson as well, and I have to say that as a scientist, I'm really pleased that you've chosen a book that somebody described as a rough guide to science. Now, on to the next question, Mr. Leigh. What luxury item could you not live without?
So I thought carefully about what one item of a luxury could I take onto the island. And seeing as I've selected my 5 albums I'm taking with me, and presuming I've got something to play them on, my one luxury item would therefore be something to listen through. And I'd always pick a really decent pair of headphones. Something there with good sound quality, good reproduction, probably noise isolating, but something that I can actually enjoy listening to the music through.
And given your eclectic collection of music to listen to, that's a good choice. Moving on, Mr. Leigh, on this desert island, as with all the previous castaways, there is a large square dining table. So who would you invite to dinner on your island?
So for this item, I would have automatically picked my family to come and be my dinner guests whilst I'm on my desert island. But seeing as there's 4 of them, it would have been slightly awkward having to leave one of them at home. So instead, I've sort of thought about, what type of people would I want on the desert island with me. So first of all, I'd want somebody to be able to cook. So I would select Simon Rimmer. Met Simon Rimmer a couple of times. Met him at his restaurant both times when it used to be in Hale, and he cooked on those evenings. Absolutely extraordinary chef, and probably the best meal I've ever had. And if I got somebody who'd cooked a beautiful meal, I'd want someone who could entertain me through the evening. And I decided that I'd go with the renowned intellect and an author, Stephen Fry, someone who I'm sure would have plenty of things that we could talk about in common, certainly from his early acting career. And then finally, I would have gone for someone I've always wanted to meet. I've sort of bumped into him a couple of times when I've been to see him in concert. I'd love to be able to sit down and have a chat with Ozzy Osbourne. And I think with him and Stephen Fry and Simon Rimmer at the dinner, I'd be both well fed and well entertained.
Well fed and well entertained indeed. It's nice to see that you followed Mr. Cole's approach of picking a chef. I think it's always a good tactic for while you're on the island. Nice to see also that you've chosen Stephen Fry. At least then you could get him to do a live reading, I guess, of the Harry Potter books. An interesting story about one of the sentences that J.K. Rowling had written that Stephen Fry had particular trouble with. We'll save that for another time, perhaps. And Ozzy, of course, you can always rely on him to perform some live concerts, no doubt. On to your final question. What would be your message in a bottle?
I think if I was writing a message in a bottle at the moment, it would be about not losing sight of maybe the things we've learnt whilst we've been on lockdown, and to, when we're released from lockdown, to have a greater appreciation of all those things that we've missed. The ability to go and visit friends and family, the ability to be kind, be generous, think of others, be careful, be caring. I'd want us to make sure that we retained all of those things, and not to lose sight of those and how important they come, but particularly to appreciate the opportunity when we have it to see family and friends again.
Thank you for those thoughtful words, Mr. Leigh. And thank you also for taking part in today's episode of Desert Island Discs. I've really enjoyed listening to your answers to the questions, and I hope that the listeners out there have also enjoyed listening to you as well. If you are listening and you've got any comments about today's episode, or if you've got any comments about any of the other podcasts, then do please let me know in the usual way via Twitter @ChiefVicar. So until tomorrow, as always, be kind, take care, and stay safe.